Have you ever wondered what it takes to sell your company for $200 million?
In this episode, we talked to David Shim, who sold his company to Snapchat for $200 million. He is the former CEO of Foursquare, and now he is the current founder and CEO of Read AI, his latest startup.
He takes us behind the scenes and shares with us all of his failures and his learnings along the way that we can apply today. Welcome back to season 3 of Tiger Sisters. I'm Jean.
And I'm Cherie.
And we're the Tiger Sisters. This is a amazing season.
Yeah, really
I just
special.
have to say, really special, really different than what we've been doing so far in a good way, because we're bringing in all of these new voices of people who are just beyond. Like once you see these, you're going to learn so much from all of our guests this season.
It's a new format where Jean and I go in. We went to a conference called Conference, and we interviewed all these incredible entrepreneurs, these leaders, and we really got to see on the inside and got to learn from them, and technically bringing in a third voice, which in reading the comments, a lot of you guys were really interested in hearing another perspective. And so this format will be a little bit different, and we hope you really enjoy it.
Yeah, so the next thing is we're going to roll the interview and then stick around, because then Cherie and I have an entire debrief, kind of like case studies in business school a little bit, where we talk about the main takeaways that we have and just sort of relate it to our lives and how we can apply it and how you could apply it too. And feel free to jump to our takeaways at the end if you want to listen to those first. You can also listen to those first and then come back to the interview, kind of however you want to take it and however you want to enjoy the learnings.
Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're listening to this episode on Apple Podcast or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating. Those ratings only take a few seconds to do, and it really means a lot to us.
And so the interview starts right after this break.
Hey guys, quick break to let you know that we now have merch on sistersmatcha.com. We have sweatshirts and t-shirts that we designed ourselves. Go check it out. And please rate us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. These ratings are so important for the distribution and survival of Tiger Sisters podcast. Thank you for your support.
So David, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Yeah, my name is David Shim. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Read AI. We're a productivity AI company. And what we do is we take meetings and we take notes. So on your Zoom call, you'll see Read AI on your call. We'll create a summary, action items, key questions. But what we're really focused in around is productivity AI. So meetings are the starting point. But what we've done is we've introduced summaries for emails, for Slack messages, for Teams messages, and we're bringing all of those together so that we can go in and give you a single report that really highlights what you're doing across all channels versus just focusing on meetings.
Amazing. Okay, David, what podcast are you listening to these days?
One of my favorite podcasts is My First Million.
Oh.
So they talk about hustling, startup life, but they've started to expand into things like, what do you do when you have an exit? What do you do when you want to find a new job? And if you don't have money to invest in startups, you're investing your time. So what are the 10 startups to go work at that will make you a millionaire? So it's not just about like the first million, but it's about understanding the startup space. And I think they really come from a different perspective where they're grinding versus it's someone from the top down that they've already had the exit or they've had huge exits.
Yeah. Have you like applied any lessons?
I did buy a stock that they just highlighted where they said, this is not an official stock recommendation. Oh, this is interesting. So that's one thing I applied.
Yeah.
But they have more kind of day-to-day kind of advice like, hey, just go out and ask someone a question. Reach out to people versus being afraid to reach out. Yeah. No one's going to care that you reached out to them. They're probably going to forget. So it doesn't really matter if you sent out the email or you sent out a call or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so smart. That's something that like I'm always trying to push myself to do more, is to just not be embarrassed 100%. And just like do the outreach. And like, what is it that it's like failure training? Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
Do you do that?
I did that a lot. I used to sell newspapers door to door.
Really?
Where it's like you deliver them, but if you have a house that's on your route that doesn't have a newspaper subscription, you'd go and knock on the door. This is the old days.
Yeah.
And so you try to sell it and you get rejected all the time. Or I used to be at a fraternity and we try to recruit people. And so the recruitment process was recruiting, but also taking rejection where it's like, oh, I chose this different house that I got started to go to. And then if you're a founder, I think rejection comes in pretty common where you have to go find new customers. You have to find product market fit. And you won't find product market fit until you get rejected a dozen times or more.
And so was the newspaper newsboy, was that your first job?
That was my first job. My mom hated that job because she had to drive me on Sundays because I used to be really scrawny.
So it was also your mom's job.
It was my mom's job too. And I was really scrawny, so I couldn't ride a bike.
Oh, really?
I couldn't ride the bike with the newspapers and Sunday papers on the back trailer.
So funny.
So my mom had to drive me.
She was really enabling you to like have a job.
She was kind of forcing me a little bit.
Yeah. Wait, so how old were you then?
I was probably like 12.
Oh,
11 or 12.
That's pretty young.
Pretty young, yeah. But it was kind of like, I think it's part of it is culturally, like ever since I was 6 or 7, I'd go to my mom's store on the weekends. We'd go Costco shopping.
Yeah.
And she'd be like, hey, go find these items, put them in the cart. We'd put them in the cart. Then we would go to her deli, and then I would stock the things in the deli, and she'd teach me like, okay, take that Coke can and spin it so the label's in the front so it's not in the back. So I just started to learn these things over time, and that was really kind of what got me into startups, what got me into just doing things. It's not that hard. Like, this is really easy.
Right. So it's kind of like, I mean, since you were 5 or 6 years old, you've been like working. I mean, I don't know, quotes or no quotes, like you've been working. So it's like a part of your nature almost.
100%.
It's like normal. You're like, yeah, I should just be working.
Yeah. It's good and bad where someone asks, what's your hobby? I say, I love to work.
Yeah.
And they're like, do you like to do anything else? And I have to think about it for a minute. I'm like movies, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. As a kid, were you a rule breaker or a rule follower?
As a kid, I was a definite rule breaker.
Oh.
And so this is in the old days where computers were in the library and there's maybe 2 in a school. I used to go in and print things out and then I would sell them.
What?
And they would start yelling at me. It's like, you can't print those out. That costs 50 cents per page to print out.
Wait, but what were you selling that you printed out?
I created these Desert Storm cards. This is when like way back when there was Desert Storm and it was really popular. Topps had a trading card set. So I just hand drew them and then I put them on paper and then I printed them out and I cut them out and then I wrapped them in like plastic wax paper.
What?
And I put candy in there and then I sold those for like $2 a pop.
Yeah.
Or $1 a pop maybe.
Wait, so how old were you?
Oh, this was like elementary school, like 6, 7, 8.
Amazing margins.
Yeah, great margins, no cost, really. Just my time. And my time was cheap.
Wait, elementary school?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So you've always been, that was like your first business.
Yeah. But I think it's also with first generation too and second generation. It's like my parents' college degree, but they had to hustle when they came here. My dad was a car salesman, didn't speak great English, but he started to learn the English very well and selling cars to everybody. Did really well. My mom, deli, grocery store, et cetera. So she had to pick up the language, but they were college educated, but really they were able to provide because a lot of it is like, you just grind. Like, even if you don't make that much money, if you put more hours into it, you still make more money than you would if you put less.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the mentality I grew up with.
So did your business ever get regulated?
I did. I got shut down a couple times as a Desert Storm card salesperson. So that was a good. But then I switched over to I had candy. So I started, everyone does this. Like you take candy and you sell it in the school.
Yeah.
So those are always kind of fun too, because it just teaches you like, okay, I buy this for this much, I sell it for this much, and I made a little bit of money and rinse and repeat.
Yeah. Amazing. So you've always been an entrepreneur, basically.
For the most part, I would say entrepreneur, more I find like opportunities that come up. And I think this is with a lot of entrepreneurs. If you just say, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to go after something, I'm going to find an idea, I'm going to do, that sort of works sometimes. But what I found is when I started my company Placed, which is location analytics, the problem that I saw was like, hey, no one's actually talking about where people are in the physical world when they have their smartphone. And so I said, hey, what if I could actually get that data, take that raw data and convert it into a store visit? And nobody else was working on that. And I was surprised. I was like, okay, maybe I'll do this. And I started to build that out. And we got to measuring a few $1 billion in advertising on an annual basis when we sold a Snap.
Oh, wow. Okay. So now it also makes so much more sense to me. Now that I know you like grew up in the deli, you grew up like stocking the shelves, like you were like all about the foot traffic, that now that I know
100%.
why you started Placed.
Yes.
It makes so much more sense. It's like part of your like DNA.
100%.
That's so cool. Okay. Well, what about now? Are you a rule breaker or a rule follower?
Still, I would say rule breaker within the laws. So as an adult, I have to follow the rules a little bit more. But it is important to break the rules. And one was the rules that we broke, like at Reed, was, hey, everyone does meetings, everyone should be invited to the meetings, and it's a good use of time. And what we said was, you know what, video conferencing, when you have 20 people on the call, is not a good use of time. And so we went in and we said, can we figure out if people are paying attention in the meeting or not paying attention in the meeting? And we call that engagement. So I could talk about how great my startup is, but if you're an investor and you're like, oh, I've heard this pitch 50 times, you get distracted. Well, if you put it into something like a large language model, it would go and say, fantastic meeting, you should absolutely invest. But if you looked at everyone's reaction on the call, it would say, that's not a good use of time. So the rule breaking there is kind of going in and saying, not everyone should be on the call. It's not a good use of time. And a bad meeting is actually good if you can actually recognize it's a bad meeting, because it says have fewer of those meetings. What are the things that you would change?
Yeah. Or even like catch it in time and like turn it around.
Exactly. In real time, where it's like being able to say, hey, the sales, I'm selling you something and you're not interested. So I can move on to the next feature or the next use case to go in and say, hey, maybe this is going to work for you.
Yeah. Oh my God. Amazing. Okay. So now, and then how old are you?
I'm 44.
44. Okay. So I can ask you this question.
Yeah.
So David, I'm 35 now.
Okay.
My sister's 29. What advice would you give to your 35 or 29-year-old self?
I would say throw yourself in your work. And a lot of people say work-life balance. I actually don't believe in that. If you want to be a founder, if you want to build something great, you have to make major sacrifices. If you look at cross history with leaders, with warriors, with scientists, it was all about going in and saying, I'm going to throw everything that I have at this problem and I'm going to build something. I'm going to build something that's meaningful for me, meaningful for the people around me, or the entire world. But you have to throw yourself into it. You've never heard of like, hey, I did 9 to 5 and I created Google. I did 9 to 5 and I created Snapchat. Those things don't happen. 9 to 5, I created nuclear energy. Like those things are not things that actually happen. And it's fine to have that balance in your life. But if you're going to go in and really, like you two are doing, building a company from the ground up, going after really new market, trying to get people to understand the value proposition, I would say throw yourself into it as much as you can, because you're only going to regret it if you didn't do it versus like, oh, maybe I'll spend a little bit more time and 4 more years on this, but I'll do 9 to 5 versus like, I figured out if this is going to work or not very quickly.
Yeah. I feel like that's what like people ask me. They're like, oh, like, what were you up to this week? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I was just working. Like I work every single day. I work every single weekend and I freaking love it. Like, I'm like, when I'm not working, I'm like, oh, I want to go back and like work on this one thing. Like I want to like, yeah. So it's, I don't know. It's like you're in like a different state almost.
100%.
Right? Where you're like in the flow state kind of all the time when you're really passionate about what you're building. You're like, and when you're like, the world needs this. Like I need to like bring it to more people.
100%. And when you deliver that too, and you see people actually respond to what your vision is, that feels better than almost anything else in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. This is kind of like, this is an off-script question, but I feel like one thing that me personally, I always have considered myself to be very weak in, and I think you're very good at, is like sales generally. And I don't mean like selling like one-to-one, but almost like selling your ideas, like representing yourself, like, you know, the concept of like sales in general. Like what is your like philosophy or your approach to that?
It's to forget very quickly. So when I pitch you something or I talk to you about something and it doesn't work, that's okay. Like, hey, I put it into my brain to say that angle didn't work, that approach didn't work, that pitch didn't work. That's okay. Now I'm going to iterate against that, or I might try the same thing again, but I think I just presented it in the wrong way. But I'll do it over and over again. Because if you let like one rejection or or a couple rejections say, oh, this idea is horrible, I'm never going to do it.
Yeah.
That's going to be a wasted opportunity, because it's more about what do you learn from that? And then how do you leverage that to actually adjust your pitch to find that right approach? Because from a selling perspective, I can tell you with Placed, we sold for Snapchat to about 200 million. And I got rejected in the series A, B, we almost raised a C, but a lot of rejection in between there. And everyone had questions like, this is never going to work. What if Google does this? What if Microsoft does this? Hey, no one's going to give you location permissions. And every single one of those, I checked it into my head to say, okay, I need to answer that question. I need to address this. And it starts to almost become a feature map for you to go in and say, okay, these are the things that people are concerned about. How do I address those? And then when you're able to come back and say, hey, that is not a problem. Here's 1, 2, 3 reasons why we were able to solve it. That becomes huge. I think the same thing came with Reed, where there's Zoom Companion AI, there's Microsoft Copilot, there's Google Gemini. All of those solutions are great. And people would come up to us and say like, what are you going to do when they come out with this product? And what do they do when they do it for meetings? I can tell you, we are 10x higher than we've ever been on Microsoft in the last year since Copilot's been introduced. And so the idea there is like, they'll take what their experiences are, but you need to show them that it's different. And now the conversation's really shifted to say, oh, how are you growing so fast? This is really incredible. Like we see the vision that you're talking about from an omni-channel perspective.
You're like, it's actually better to have a competitor because I'm not the one doing all the marketing anymore.
100%.
Like I could just be like, oh yeah, it's like Copilot, but better.
Absolutely.
Like, we have XYZ features.
No, and that's
what people don't get about competition. It's not always competition. It's actually better to have like more people in your area sometimes.
No, I think you're absolutely right, especially when it comes to AI. Because if you think about AI 5 years ago, people would get scared. It's like, oh, it's the robots. They're going to take over. Your jobs are going to disappear. All these bad things are going to happen. In reality, Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, everyone started to talk about what the benefits are. And people are like, oh, this is fantastic. Like I've got teachers that reach out to us now and say like, hey, I want to use this for my class. This is my use case. I'm like, that's fantastic. I didn't have that use case in mind, but you're using this to actually make your work-life balance a little bit better, but also spend more time with the kids because now you're able to use technology to free up your time.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so I feel like your philosophy is kind of like iteration, basically. It's like you see every like sales conversation as like a way to iterate and then like build up your like pitch to be better and more durable. But then what about like, sometimes I feel like if I'm going into a conversation, like I feel like it's kind of like high stakes. Do you ever feel that way? Or you're just like, I don't know, what if a conversation feels more high stakes to you? How do you approach it differently or what do you do?
I used to do this a lot growing up. I overthink things a lot.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, what happens here? I played out the scenarios, et cetera. But then once you're in the weeds and you're so focused in on something, I just go in and say, okay, what am I in this meeting for? What's this presentation about? Let me go deliver it. And I try not to overanalyze it beyond the moment. And I want to communicate what my focus is like, hey, this is my product. This is what we do. This is the value proposition. But I don't want to be like, what if they don't like it? What if they react this way? Because it'll throw you off. And a great example was with Imran. When I met him, the first time I met him, Snapchat reached out to me and said like, hey, can you come out to New York, meet with Imran Khan, Chief Strategy Officer. He wants to understand.
Never heard of him.
Yeah. We want to understand your product a little bit better. And I was like, great. I would love a partnership because we want to measure your advertising to store visits when I was placed. So I met with Imran. And he's like asking me these questions. I'm like, oh, he's a cool guy. He's asking me a lot of cool questions, smart. And then I started to get to the end of the conversation. He's like, so if you could do anything with Snapchat, what would it be? And I said, I want to measure your advertising to store visits. He's like, no, you could do whatever you want with Snapchat, like big picture vision. And this is where I might have been a little bit wrong, but I think the outcome was good. I was like, no, I want to measure ads to store visits and I'm going to make Snap be a direct response channel.
Yeah.
And his response was like, okay. And I left. I was like, that's the worst response possible. Come a couple quarters later, Snapchat acquired Place. I asked Imran, he's like, that's the worst answer I ever got from all the companies that I talked with. But it does highlight, like, if you're building something great, it doesn't matter how that interaction is. If you're delivering against a specific use case, it doesn't matter how your pitch is if you're solving that problem.
Yeah. Okay. And it kind of like, it helps because you're like, you know what? It does. Even if an interaction feels like incredibly like high stakes, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is high stakes. Like there's always like other information that people are pulling in.
Exactly. And there's other, if you're pitching someone from a startup, there's other VCs. So even if you make a mistake on one, there are others. They get pitched so often, they'll forget who, and this is not an insult to anyone who's doing it, but they'll forget who you are. So your first pitch doesn't go well. The second pitch might be better and they might have forgotten completely what that first pitch was or what you're talking about because they're constantly getting pitched.
Yeah.
So I would say just let it wash off of you because rejection is the key because no one ever gets it right on the first shot every single time.
Yeah. You just like the first time you're David Shim. Now you're like, I'm Dave Shim.
Yeah.
Hi, it's me.
That's why I have the long hair and beard now because I couldn't raise the first time.
You're like, I'm Dave S. last time. Okay, cool. Okay, Dave, what is a hot take or belief that you have that you think no one else believes in your industry?
Meeting notes are going to be a commodity. So I believe that meeting notes are the first way people understand the value of AI. You're on a call, you don't have to take notes, immediately valuable. Oh, you can summarize it, even better. I can forward that to somebody else. I don't have to do email recap to the people that are on the call. But that's really level one of AI. That's the age of the assistant. I think where we're going towards is past the age of the agent. And the AI agent is like an employee. It's going to go in and take all the reports that you created and summarize it and say, hey, here's the status report. And maybe here's a PowerPoint deck that talks about what we did. But where we're going to is optimization. And AI is going to be about optimization and outcomes. And it's really like ad tech in a lot of ways, where it's advertising. It's going in and saying, you've got all this data around ad exposures, conversions on the ad tech side. When it's interactions like meetings, messages, calls, emails, et cetera, all those things combined, if you treat them all as a silo, you can't optimize. But if you bring them all together, you can start to go in and optimize your day. You could say, hey, 12 clients have just complained about this product feature. Do you want me to create a PRD so that we can send it to the product manager?
Oh, wow.
So that's an outcome. That's
that is a
AI
great
optimizing.
example. But so then Read AI today is an agent, but is moving towards being an optimizer, or it's like an agent with elements of optimizers. How would you describe it?
So we've done the assistant very well.
Yeah.
We are doing the agent today, bringing it all together. The optimization is coming now. And the first glance will be our Chrome extension, where we're able to go in and actually summarize your emails. That's assistant.
Yeah.
Senior employees actually going to go in and say, hey, let me insert a Zoom meeting. Let me insert a Slack message in the actual thread to give you contextual relevance on the status of a project. And then the actual optimization is going to be the autocomplete, which will come out later this year, where as you type the email, someone asks you a question, what's the status on this project? We'll automatically fill that in. Even though the email itself doesn't have the answer, we can pull in from your meetings, your messages, and your other emails.
Oh, cool. I want that. I want that bad. Okay. You were previously CEO of Foursquare.
Yep.
And then also I know you've just generally done a lot of public speaking. So what's a good public speaking like tip or media training tip that you would share?
I try not to practice an hour or two before the actual presentation or the speech. The reason why is you're putting too much information in your head. I like to think that you process it in the background when you're dreaming, when you're thinking about it, when you're stressing about it. Like those are all points where you're actually processing the speech, the presentation. So do the prep work, do the outline, do the run through to make sure you're on time. But right before the speech, don't go in and like try to over add things. Don't try to make adjustments. Let the response kind of come from you naturally and organically. And I think people appreciate that. I just had a presentation last week where I just went up and I totally changed the presentation in terms of how I presented, because I looked at the audience and the previous presenter, there was about 75% were looking at their phones. So I was like, okay, I got to spice this up, because otherwise everyone's going to look at their phones. So I was like, hey, my name is David. Thanks for having me. And it was totally out of the ordinary for me to do, but it's like you're responding to that in the moment, because I wasn't thinking about, remember point one, when you say point one, say this line and say this joke. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just more about, let me respond to the moment. Let me respond to the audience.
But is it like you can only do that because you did the preparation and you like knew the like tenets of what you wanted to say in general?
In general, yes.
Yeah.
In general, you had to know the tenets on what to say. And the thing I would say that really helped me from a speaking and public speaking and the reaction stuff is, as a startup founder, there are a lot of conferences. And when you go to those conferences, they always have slots for startups or different ideas or pitches. I probably did maybe 100 to 200 different presentations for startup events, competitions, et cetera. And when you start to do that, it starts to become second nature.
Wow. So you've gotten your reps in. That's why you're so good. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, seriously. Like, I feel like you can just tell when someone's like very like naturally like a good speaker, but you built it up over time.
Yes. If you saw me early days, it was bad. I spoke in front of like 4 people or 5 people at times at a conference, because it wasn't a very good conference. But then you can do whatever you want. That's the great part. It's like, oh, there's 4 people here. What's the worst that can happen? I'm just going to go all out.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. So what are you most excited about for conference, or what's like the most valuable like aspect of it so far?
It's 100% the people. The level and caliber of people that come to this event, that participate in this event, is huge. Of course, both of you. It's incredible. And if you go to a conference, the way that you can tell if the content is good or not is how many laptops are open, how many people are on their phone. And when you look out in the audience at the conference, you see that people are engaged. They're listening to the speaker. They're raising their hands where they want to ask a question. And I think that's incredible. And then everyone at the events that we have at the conference, or that we join at the conference, they've been incredibly friendly. Everyone's there to just get to know each other, to
Yeah.
make connections. And no one's really kind of trying to sell you anything. No one's trying to promote something. They're just trying to meet new folks.
Yeah. I was even surprised that in the sessions, like everyone is at the session. I feel like most conferences, people like ditch the sessions.
100%.
So it just goes to the level of quality.
100%.
Exciting. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Wow.
What a great conversation.
I'm blown away.
So good. But before we get to the takeaways, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're listening to this episode on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating. We'll be right back, and then we'll dive right into our key takeaways. Hey everyone, quick break to share something special. Sisters Matcha. We've launched limited batches of ceremonial grade, single estate, single cultivar matcha, straight from the family farm Cherie worked on in Japan. It's pure, authentic, and crafted with intention. Head to sistersmatcha.com to grab yours before it sells out. Make matcha your daily ritual for lasting energy and focus.
And we're back.
We're back.
Okay, back to my wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought overall it was such an engaging conversation. Learned so much.
I think I'm in love.
There's like just so many things to talk about, but I think a good place to start would be more talking about, I love how David went into his background and that question that we asked him about, you know, what was your first childhood job and all that stuff. It actually came up totally organically.
Yeah, very natural.
But all of that I thought was very informative in understanding who he is today and how he has achieved so much success.
Yeah. And I think also just like hearing his like childhood stories about how he was such a hustler in like elementary school, helping his mom with his like family's deli growing up. Like it also like derives like a lot of like sympathy, empathy. I don't know what it is, but like I love him and I love his story. And you just really want to root for him as an entrepreneur because of like how much hard work, sweat equity he's been putting in, but he doesn't even consider it that. Like it's so much a part of his DNA.
Well, I was really impressed by his story about how he basically started his own business when he was 6 years old with drawing those little cards and then wrapping them up and selling them. Like amazing margins because pretty much like almost negligible, de minimis like input costs.
Yeah, and he's just like, my hourly cost was not that much at that time.
It reminds me of when you had an NFT business. Not business, but Cherie actually made a bunch of NFTs.
Yes.
Back when it was like all the rage.
In 2021. It was not a rug pull. It was very legitimate. It was a utility NFT. But yeah, it's like the hustling, trying things out.
Yeah.
Like
and she sold them and people bought them.
Yeah, and people
like
actually
they were
bought the
pieces of
NFT.
art. So it's kind of what he was selling, like art, but like tradable.
Yeah.
But it's just like it begs the question. Sometimes people are like, oh, are entrepreneurs born or made? Or like, are, you know, really successful people born or made? This one, I'm almost like, dang.
He was born.
He was kind of born.
He was born.
He was born ready.
But also, I think a lot of it, he saw his parents, especially how he was saying, like, he worked in his mom's deli. Like, he would take the Coke can and then, like, turn it so the labels would face front. Like, he kind of had that upbringing to be, like,
right.
I don't know what it's called. It's just, like, an entrepreneurial mindset, like a doer.
Yeah.
A doer, hustler mentality. He's not afraid of hard work, and he doesn't even see it as hard work, I would say. It seems like when people ask, like, what is work for you what is work for others that is play for you, like I can see that really being David's. Like,
it reminds me of one of the things he said that really resonated with me is he said, when people respond to what your vision is, it's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah.
So I could see that even having been true for him when he was 6 years old, when he was making those stormtrooper cards or whatever they're called. And
Desert Storm.
Sorry, not my generation. But he was like drawing those cards, selling them. People bought them. Like people were responding to his vision, and he probably felt really excited by that.
Yeah.
Even when he got regulated by the librarian.
I mean, it even goes to show, I think a lot of times I get questions that people ask me, either friends or people in comments. They're just like, where do you start? How do you start? And the answer is you just start. Like I don't have all the answers. I don't know. You do a little bit of research, and like the quicker you can minimize the time to start and like how you start is just by doing, you know. Some people ask me like, how'd you make a podcast? Like I'm like, you just kind of start. And the first few ones you do are questionable in terms of quality, but you just got to learn.
Yeah, and you use the resources available to you. And those resources might be the library printer and your hand drawings.
Exactly. One of my favorite points that David made was that you have to forget quickly. I think that is just so applicable to the professional world, to the personal world. If you want to be happy, you should let go and forget quickly. He also specifically talked about getting a lot of reps in when he was pitching his startup. I think he said something along the lines of like 100 to 200 times you're practicing, you're pitching. And of course, of those times when you're first starting out, you're going to get rejected. But you have to forget those rejections, remember what they said, so then you can like fine tune your pitch or whatever you're saying, like your proposal, and make it better for the next time.
Yeah, I liked how he approached it almost as like he made it almost lower stakes for himself by being like, no matter what, I'll get a learning from this. And these are lower stakes because this is an opportunity for me to get another point of feedback and to almost add one more piece of input into my feature roadmap. He basically said that. He was like, all of the questions that I got that I stumbled on, those eventually turned into what was akin to a feature roadmap of like what I needed to build out or like what I needed to consider, or like they were helping me by pointing out my blind spots.
Or like what are the questions I need to answer, because like if 3 people are asking this question, like I need to answer it for the next time. I actually have a close friend of mine is building a startup, and he and his team weren't raising money yet, but they were just talking to a bunch of VCs. I think he said he talked to like 30 VCs. They're not fundraising, just to get, a pulse check, a heat check on like how people are feeling about it. And he said that stakes were low because they're not raising right now. But he took the initiative to like go talk to all these VCs, and every single time they asked a question, he would write it down. So the next time he would pitch, it's the same thing David did. Like the next time he would pitch, it would be like answered and addressed, so that when he did start raising money and they just closed their like seed funding, it's tight, the argument is tight because they've already done the upfront work.
This is a great insight and very applicable. I'm gonna start doing that for Sisters Worldwide.
Oh, you will?
Just like having conversations and kind of seeing like what the perception and reception of what we're doing is in market, because it is kind of like a newer
concept
business format. It's a newer company format, and it's a newer like revenue model that is not really, it's not commonly.
We're Mr. Beast, and people are like, huh? You know what? Honestly, it's so much better to have doubt from other people and a lot of questions, because then it's exactly like what we need to address for the next time.
Yeah, I guess it's more useful ultimately
to
have questions and to have like people doubt you and ask these insightful questions, as opposed to just getting back nothing. Then you kind of like really did waste your time. Then you're just practicing talking. That's all.
I mean, also it's part of an entrepreneur's like resilience, that when you do receive pushback and doubt, that you're like so strong and you believe in what you're doing, that you're like, oh, I just need to take this input and refine, and not completely crash out and be like, what am I doing? These like VCs are questioning me. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's all of those things combined to make I think a strong entrepreneur.
Yeah. I think that's also why, like, historically, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, I feel like so many of our friends who are really good at having these conversations used to be in debate, because they're used to having to like react to being questioned, to having their argument or their statements questioned. And like you just build up a resilience of being able to like respond without crashing out, basically. Without like freezing in the moment.
Or taking it personally. And I think
because they literally did it when it was a game.
It
was like a competition in high school or whatever for them. So the stakes were, I guess they were high, but they were low. Relatively.
I mean, the people I know in my life, my friends, coworkers, the best speakers are the ones who have done some sort of debate or like junior model Congress type of stuff in high school or whatever, or middle school. I wish I had done that. I would think if I had, I would have, right now, I'd probably be more poised to debate on like debate on ideas, and also not take things too personally. It's not an attack on me or my characters, an attack on the idea. But sometimes I take things really personally. I'm working on it.
Yeah, to the point, I really loved how David put it, the specific words that he said, where he said, just let it wash off you. And I like that because it's so visual and it's so like visceral.
Yeah.
Where it's like if you get all of this like inbound, I guess like doubt, which can feel like an attack on your idea, which, you know, especially if the idea is your baby, can feel very personal, even when it's not. Just let it wash off you. Like it's so like you can visualize it and like have it happen.
Yeah.
I feel like it's more helpful that way.
Yeah.
That it's tied to a physical activity.
You know what I think about actually in terms of visualization? Because one of my old bosses used to say something similar.
Is it Albert?
No, it was actually Eric.
Oh, Eric.
Eric Wellenbacher. Something he used to say that I think about constantly. He says, water off a duck's back. Same concept.
Yeah.
Let it wash off of you. He said not only the negative feedback about whatever your idea is, but even positive feedback that you're getting. He said they should affect you both the same way, which is, crazy to think about at first glance. But I kind of really like it. He's just like, you don't want to react too high to the highs and you don't want to react too low to the lows.
Yeah, he is a very he's all about like equilibrium and zen.
Yes.
Like all of Cherie's bosses, like I've only met a couple of them, but she talks about them so much that I feel like they're my friends too, even though like they don't know me at all and I don't know them personally at all either. But I'm like, oh, my good friend Eric Wellenbacher.
Yes. But it's same concept. Water off a duck's back, let it wash off you. Something that I used to say is DILMO, DILMO. Do it, learn, move on. It sounds odd, but I try to think about this often. Moving on is really hard.
Did you make this up?
I did.
Oh,
I did.
She's been saying it for so long that I thought she like got it from
It's like a framework or something.
Yeah, I thought it was like some sort of framework that they taught at LinkedIn.
I made this up. Obviously I don't own the concept, but like I made up this acronym.
Guys, she's been trying to make DILMO happen for 7 years.
It's actually been since 2021. I actually made a TikTok about it. Everyone's like, what? I mean, they like the concept. It sounds weird, but DILMO. I like it. Move on. Yeah.
DILMO, guys.
DILMO.
Just DILMO.
Just DILMO. And then the last thing, well, actually, it's not one. One other thing that I really love that David said that made me feel like he's so low ego is that when he was like pitching to VCs, he was just like, you'll be forgotten, which is like really refreshing. And obviously no one wants to be forgotten, but in the idea that like you're pitching to so many companies that like, they're talking to so many other people every single day, like you will be forgotten. The stakes are pretty low.
Yeah. Or it's more so like the details of what you're saying will be forgotten. Maybe not you as a person will be like erased from their memory, but like exactly what you're pitching, it's not going to like stay with them for forever, especially if they decided to pass on you.
Yeah.
So his point is that don't feel embarrassed to go back to the same person who passed on you once and be like, hey, like, let me talk to you again. Like, I heard what you said. I applied it and this is where we are today, blah, blah, blah. So don't be afraid to have that second conversation. I kind of had mentioned it once before in the context of like applying to the same company again and again.
Yeah.
And how by the time I finally got my first job at Goldman Sachs, I had already been rejected twice when I had applied for internships in 2008.
Previous years.
And 2009 during the Great Recession. But yeah, so don't worry about it.
I mean, if you had let that stop you, then you wouldn't have applied. You've been like, Goldman Sachs hates me.
Yeah.
I have no shot, which is obviously not the case because then you end up getting the job.
Right. Because, yeah, they did forget me, honestly. Like, probably the people that interviewed me never even interviewed me again. It was a whole new set of people who interviewed me.
Yeah.
So I literally was forgotten, but for the better.
Yeah, that's great.
Is this where you want to pitch? You're saying where it can be good to be forgotten.
It could be good to be forgotten. I thought that could be like she was rejected twice from Goldman Sachs and then she got a job. You know what I mean? A sensational headline.
Yeah.
But yeah.
She was rejected from Wall Street twice.
Yep. Wall Street rejected her twice. Then she got in the third time. Watch what happens now.
She has the podcast now. That's what happens. I also liked when we kind of advance the conversation to asking him about what if a conversation feels more high stakes, because I think that is a different situation where it's harder to go in and like really enact all of these like pieces of advice where you're saying, oh, just let it wash off you, don't worry, you can come back again and they'll forget. And I liked how his advice was a little bit different in this instance, where David said just worry about that moment. Don't worry about what their reaction is going to be, because that's almost too many things to be holding in your head at the same time. Just worry about about communicating what you came to say and making sure that communication is clear and getting that information through to them.
Yeah. And I think, the last part of that story or that anecdote is that like at the end of the conversation, he thought he had like a flub, like he messed up. But then honestly, what he had said before all of that was he was felt so good about, and the idea was sure, and he felt very confident in, that idea, what he came to say. That didn't really matter in the end, where he like might have made a misstep in like the last part of the conversation.
Yeah. And then it also goes back to ultimately his product and his idea were sound.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the product stood for itself and spoke for itself in a lot of ways, even though his answer to like the big question that Imran asked him was not good, admittedly. Like Imran even told him later that was the worst answer. I thought that was funny.
I thought that's so funny. God, I love him. Both Imran and David.
Yeah.
Because,
that is also very Imran to just be like, yeah, your answer was terrible. It was the worst one I ever got. One other topic that we talked about that I think is not commonly spoken about is why competition can be a good thing for your business.
I love that.
Especially if you are working in a line of business that is more novel or isn't as commonly understood.
Right. I think, the part of the conversation was that like, is competition a bad thing? Is like the crux of it. Because I think everyone generally assumes that having a lot of competition is bad. And I like how you and David talked about like turning it on its head. What are the moments where it can be beneficial for you and or your company?
Right. For him, he was saying, Microsoft Copilot is a common competitor that people keep asking him about. He said that after Microsoft Copilot was released, they increased 10 times for Read AI. And that's actually something that I had also seen personally through working in augmented reality and AI over the last, 7 years.
Yeah. She has 50 patents in AI, guys.
Over 50.
Over 50. Sorry. She has over 50 patents.
But it was just one of the things that I spent a long time doing was building up the augmented reality advertising platform at Snapchat. And it started back when it was so novel. We were the first ones to do it. Everything was manual. So every time someone made an ad, you had to basically, 1, explain to them what it is, 2, show it to them, 3, demonstrate why it was efficacious, and then 4, actually sell them on why they should spend their money on it. And so everyone was really concerned about when TikTok actually came out with their same platform selling AR advertising. But to me, it was helpful because then we weren't the only example.
Yeah.
Right? Like TikTok was also going to these same companies, to Coca-Cola, to Pizza Hut, to whoever, and trying to sell them on the same idea. So we didn't have to do all of the work every single time to do the education. So it kind of like helped cut out the first one or 2 steps for us.
Yeah, product education, like, something we learned in my like product launch class is like the hardest thing is like educating and or changing the behaviors or mindset of people, of your users or your customers. It's really difficult. So then if you have competitors in the space as well who are doing it for you, basically, with you, for you, it really cuts down the work that you have to do.
Yeah.
I actually see this with Sisters Matcha as well. Could you imagine? Like matcha, for the world, I think it's still, people are learning what it is, but like for the markets that like we're in, like the girlies who love matcha already.
Well, Starbucks recently came out with matcha drinks that are sugar-free.
Yes, that are
yes,
different from their original ones. But like now Starbucks is doing it, like basically every cafe in like California, New York, like
not every cafe, not every. I would
in
say,
LA and NYC.
Yeah,
like
I would say less than 50% still.
But many of them now have matcha drinks.
Yeah,
so
which is
that,
so
like,
helpful for us because we don't have to then explain to everyone what is matcha because they'll be like, "Oh, I've seen this before,"
or like
Starbucks.
I've at least heard of it before. I think people still don't quite understand the health benefits, but if people are already drinking it, it's like a different battle.
Well, the part that is not helpful is that cafes, the matcha that they're serving is much, much lower quality than the matcha that we're serving. So
as
a
much
lot of
sugar in
times, or more times often than not, the matcha experience that people are having is way worse than what they would get for Sisters Matcha.
That's true.
So people try it once and then they don't like it because they're like, ew, it's kind of bitter. It's like overly grassy. It's kind of grainy. And those are just
Horrible.
So then we
matcha
have to
drinks.
like re-educate in a way so that we're like, that is not the matcha that you're going to get through us. Like that is not the matcha that we're used to having. That is like the
Starbucks matcha. Don't drink it.
That's like what is that really bad salmon? Not bad salmon, but the salmon that they feed to the fishes, to the dogs in Alaska. Chum salmon, coho salmon.
It's oh no, it's called dog. I think it's called dog salmon.
Dog salmon. I think there's the official name for it, but that's like the vast majority of people who are trying matcha in the United
That's
States
a really gross comparison.
are trying that salmon versus like king salmon or like what you would get in a restaurant.
Ah, I see. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the times it's like, they're using like baking matcha, which is like lower quality, or like cooking matcha for cooking, in drinks because it comes in bulk and it's cheaper. It's not as good as the good stuff with Sisters Matcha. So yeah, another example. But it's so pros and cons of having competitors in the space.
Yeah. I mean, I think it also applies to our broader business that includes Tiger Sisters in our podcast as well, because I am very curious to, once I start having these conversations with VCs, as to what their perception of like the viability of this type of business is. I just don't know what they think so far.
One way to find out.
Yeah.
Get pitching, girl.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this special episode of Tiger Sisters. Please stay tuned. We have many more interviews and takeaways coming up soon.
Like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and also Spotify. It makes a huge difference. It really does, for just 5 seconds of your time. Thanks so much.
See you next
Bye.
time. Bye.